Hey guys, my name is Steven. I am currently the marketing manager at StreamPlay.io. I have about 7 to 8 years of gaming industry experience as a professional gamer in StarCraft 2 and as a marketeer for various gaming companies. I played StarCraft 2 from essentially one was famous from 2011 to 2013 under the banner of Fnatic, one of the biggest teams in the whole world. And right after post my graduation, and post my retirement as a professional gamer, I work at Hearthstone, more well known for their World of Warcraft add-ons for Minecraft, also for Cursed Voice, which is later bought out by Twitch TV, which was also bought out by Amazon. Um, Post that, I worked at DOS Keyboard continuously as a marketeer, more or less full stack, basically advertising and market about mechanical keyboards. And while I was there, we were able to sell the top tier keyboards. I think it was called the DOS Keyboard 4 series, one of the most recognized mechanical keyboard out there that is not gaming related. My current position focuses a lot more on developing marketing strategies for various startup type of games such as Slay.one. Streamplay.io will eventually be a platform where where users can interact with streamers and developers. I would like to introduce my co-host for this podcast. Simon, would you please introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm here to co-host this podcast with Stephen. My name is Simon. I back in university, I dabbled in the World of Warcraft competitive scene, 3 versus 3, and I was able to get into the top 5 for the EU region. Afterwards, I started getting into the gaming industry, starting off by working in marketing, and did exclusively mobile games and did marketing for games such as Clash of Kings. And after that, which was a few years, I moved onto the production of games, and I work on strategy games, also alike to Clash of Kings, games such as Battle Warships, and also recently games such as Slay.one, which Stephen is also working on.
Cool, yeah. So we're here to bring you news in both the gaming industry and the esport industry. I'll be definitely be a little more familiar on the esport side, but Simon
Yeah.
definitely has a lot of insights on the gaming news.
Yeah.
So we're going to go over a few topics today in the esports industry. One of them being Hearthstone, a online card game similar to Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh, made by Blizzard. And also we'll talk a little bit about the international traveling for esport competitors, how some of the current policies in the U.S. kind of affects the way esports is competing at this point. So with Hearthstone, uh, let's kind of just jump in a little bit, talk a little bit about how it evolved from just a simple card game to a competitive scene so quickly, right? I think it was only released about 3 years ago, and yet it is basically completely overtaken Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic the Gathering in terms of practicality. And I feel like it's just way easier to learn. The learning curve is easy. It's more fun. People spend less money comparatively because you don't actually have to go into a store to buy cards. What do you think about that, Simon?
Well, I can't say much about Magic the Gathering, but I like you said, it's cheaper compared to Hearthstone, that's for sure. Because with Magic the Gathering, you're probably opening tons of packs just to get those few cards that you really need for your deck, and that can really come down to just buying loads of packs to get it. Whereas Hearthstone, um, in one way, yes, it is cheaper because you don't need to physically go buy packs, but at the same time, um, with the meta changing from time to time, there's normally stronger decks, so you can go and look for those specific cards that you need for your deck and then build those, which are currently at the top of the meta. And at the same time, if you're getting cards that you don't need, you can break them down into dust and then use that dust to kind of make the cards you want for the decks you need.
Yeah, I kind of want to follow up a little bit on that actually with the breaking dust, spending basically in-game virtual currencies to get something that's more virtual. I think Blizzard made a really good model on that. It's you can spend money to buy packs, do certain kind of questing within the game, and also these things are also offered free of cost if if you want to wait. Essentially, it's like a really good business model. You don't physically have to own any cards. You just have to play long enough, and you'll be able to build everything you want to it. The spending money part actually only focuses on getting things faster than everyone else. So I think that's really cool compared to the traditional way of going out there, buy some packs, and open it up like you said. Have randomly pick a card out that can maybe cost you 30, $40 to buy
Yeah.
online, which is really ridiculous. I remember back in my Yu-Gi-Oh days, which it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, is playing tournaments. I actually played in quite a few tournaments, and I just remember clearly my deck itself, the raw cost of the whole deck that's competitive is at least $1,000 or so.
That's quite steep.
And it's 40 cards. It's only 40 cards. I know Magic is probably even more. Like lands are pretty cheap, but certain cards, even if they're just a normal card, I remember it costing 40, $50 very easily.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Yeah. So moving on to talk a little bit more about Hearthstone. So they actually recently announced something called the Global Games that focuses more on team play between different countries. I remember reading about it. It's actually quite interesting. I think Blizzard's been trying to brand their Hearthstone game as a competitive game, but they are having a really difficult time formatting it in a way where it's enjoyable for the players. I remember back in 2014 15, it was all individual plays. There's really no teams. And when it comes to team play, the format was not very good. There's no real bands. The format I think is it's getting quite good. What do you think about the current formats and what Blizzard are trying to achieve to make Hearthstone a competitive game?
Well, from the very beginning, it's always been kind of one player from one team coming out to represent the team, and then one versus one, rather than the team of players from that team, the group of players from that team coming out and playing against each other. So rather than a 1v1 become a 4v4. So in that way, you're getting to see more players out there and what the team as a whole can accomplish rather than just the individual player. And rather than individual decision making, you're looking at the team decision making, which is also a very core aspect of esports with a lot of other games as well, because you have more than one player and one player making the decisions and calling the shots. So by bringing this to Hearthstone, I think it evolves the game a lot more and gives you a peek into more esports and gives an opportunity to more competitive players out there that want to kind of have a go at the esports scene.
Right, yeah, just to follow up a little bit on that, you talk a little bit about teams. This kind of reminds me of the good old days of Kespa with StarCraft 2, where it's always, every time there's a competition, it's mostly team based. And it's really fun because it feels kind of like NBA, you send your players out based on potentially guarding against LeBron James, you potentially send players out to snipe another player. So it's actually quite interesting. There's a lot more strategy into it. And I think also individual competitions is kind of dying down a little bit. If you look at the esport nowadays, there's not a single game that really focuses on 1v1. StarCraft 2 being the exception, but let's be real. It's kind of dying down. There's the popularity is not there as much, and team leagues. I just remember watching them. They're super fun. You never know who they're gonna send out. You never know what kind of decks they're gonna prepare. You never know how they're going to play. And I feel like that aspect actually is very exciting, and especially for this one, I think it's because it's more based on nationality. So you have more sense of nationalism in a way. When you win or lose as a team, it's okay. Lose as a team or as an individual, fine. But now your whole country's on the line. I think there's a lot more pride going into it, even if the players don't feel as intense. I think it's more of a subconscious kind of thing.
Well, if you look at the structure now, it's team based, right? And then the team's probably going to send like 4 people to compete against another 4 people. So say let's mention a random team, Cloud9 against another team, and you're going to send one person to compete, and then 3 people are going to sit there with that one person who is playing the game against the other team's one person with 3 people sitting behind. And now that you say they're representing the whole country, there's going to be more on the line, so to speak. Not only money, there's pride. You're the best team or the best of the many great teams from your country or from your whole region, and you're representing everyone. And there's going to be a lot of national pride. There's going to be a lot of people tuning in because you're representing the whole country. It's probably aiming more closer to, say, a massive Olympic scene, perhaps, even if that's not an exaggeration. So more people will be watching, more hype will be generated, and it brings in even more fans rather than fans of just one team. But the fans will look at the team as a country or a region representative rather than a team. So the supporters will all be there together rather than just supporting an individual team. So that's something that is great for the esports.
Yeah, I think it's really, we keep talking about how it's representing different teams versus nationality. I think the way Blizzard is taking this is also, when you think about it, they're kind of mimicking sports in a way, right? Because you can have players from different nationalities playing, let's say, American football, let's say baseball. Basketball is a great good example. Their focus is on the city. So no matter where the players come from, no matter what the team is called, they're in that city. Houston Rockets, let's say, Cleveland. What is LeBron James team? Brain fart right there. But the point is you get very hyped up for localizing things, localizing events, localizing your players to cater towards the audience. I, I definitely think Blizzard's way of approaching this will be very similar to how esports will eventually become. It might be more national based. If it gets big enough, it might become more city based. It's a pretty revolutionary way of thinking of esports compared to let's say back a few years ago, where you will see a player just come out and compete and you cheer for him. It's kind of cool, but it's definitely not the trend as we see per se for the past 5 years, where more nationalistic teams are formed. I remember Alliance is a very big team that was only Swedes. There's Evil Geniuses is a far more of an exception, have players from every culture, but let's say their core team for their Dota 2 team was basically all American. So these kind of nationalistic way of doing doing sort of promotions, it's very, very cool.
Yeah, definitely. So recently, it's come to light something new within the Hearthstone community that's brought about a lot of drama, and I'm talking about the Pooney Hoff incident, quote unquote. And what basically happened was back in 2014, there was this tournament that Pooney Hoff hosted and was the admin for, and basically players were calling him out, or there is this one player that's calling him out now in 2017. I believe it was posted on Reddit, the Hearthstone community, only a few days ago, calling him out for kind of manipulating the winning results or the winning team, specifically the team he belonged to give them an advantage and come in fourth place and essentially move on to the next tournament. And instead of VVV, which is another team that kind of had to take the hit for this, his team won. And a member of VVV posted this topic on Reddit saying that basically he still has a lot of problems with that. He think it wasn't fair. He thought it wasn't fair. He thought there was a lot of issues with the tournament. He thought Pooneyhoff shouldn't have that kind of power and shouldn't be able to do that. And at the end of the day, this kind of affected a lot of players and a lot of new players in the esports scene. As at that time, it's only 2014, so it's one of the first tournaments, or one of the early tournaments, in fact, that was coming to Hearthstone. So this was a big deal. Stephen, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, so the main drama came from that he was actually invited directly by Blizzard to potentially play in the global games that we've been discussing, and essentially his characters were put in place. Essentially, the community started calling him out to get a little triggered from what he's done in the past, which is a little unfair. If he actually wrote a response video which was not very convincing in my opinion. He said something along the lines of, "Well, I was an admin. It's the first tournament I've ever done. I admit I miscalculated. I'm sorry, and also I play in the tournament even though I'm an admin." These kind of things are very immature. I feel like esports been around for a long time, and starting since StarCraft, Brood War, StarCraft 2. If you're an admin for a tournament, there's no way by any chance that you're allowed to play. Or if you play, you're basically digging yourself a hole. So essentially, right now people are protesting against this guy. I personally like his stream. He streams a lot in the European time zone. Pretty nice guy, but if you do some shady character kind of thing within this esport, I guess we'll say in the sport industry, competitive industry, it's very difficult to come back from that. People are just protesting against him. I personally don't think it's that big of a deal. It's been 2 years. Come on, yes, he's made a mistake. He's not admitting it, but the whole point is Blizzard wants to have a competitive scene. So no matter who they invite, it shouldn't be their morals or their characters. I feel like that they should pull up at least. But that's my personal opinion. Um, Nothing good, nothing bad comes out of this. There's a little bit of drama. I think it kind of spices up the tournament itself as well. Not necessarily in the good way, but it it makes things more fun and interesting. Maybe if this player end up playing, he plays against the member that complained about him. It's like a pretty big rivalry. From 2 years ago, one guy gets think he got cheated over. The other guy is just coming in as a villain. It's a pretty cool story to have as well. And I feel like esports need this kind of rivalry. Maybe more or less a little bit of drama with lots of rivalry. What do you think?
Well, I think rivalry is probably a good thing where one player challenges another player or says, "I'm better than you." Okay, this sort of drama is okay. But at the end of the day, I think if you're calling out a person for who they are and they're a bad person or if they've done something wrong, especially if it's many years in the past, and especially if the person's already admitted to mistakes, come on, everyone's made mistakes in the past. And if you're able to come up and say, "Okay, I've done something wrong," I think that's you're already doing a good thing. You're on the right path, and especially like it's a big deal because everyone's related. If okay, everyone makes mistakes, and it's just not brought in the public light, so it's not a big deal. But because this small issue, it's actually a very tiny issue, and it's brought in the public spotlight, and then therefore it's become a huge thing. And in fact, it has nothing to do with a lot of people that are commenting on it. So I would say props for the guy kind of admitting to his mistakes. I mean, he's a good streamer. He's a likable guy. I don't think it deserves that much hate. At the person and who he is, I don't think it deserves that much hate. And this situation again is probably not that great, but it's already in the past and it's years ago. It doesn't impact today, so that's my thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's a lot of hate. I mean, it's Reddit, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
that's one thing we have to consider is Reddit is very toxic. People jump on about the hate train, as they call it. People are salty. You know, yeah, it happens in the past. I feel like we should just kind of let it go. Focus more on the positive part of the tournament. Look at its development in the next few months, and come back and revisit in the future.
Okay, so we'd like to talk about Hearthstone, how RNG is a big deal. Basically, if you're new to RNG is basically a random number generator. And what this means is, say, your deck has 30 cards, and you start off with X amount of cards, and every turn you draw one card randomly from your deck at random. So you could possibly get any card, and any card could either mean a win or a lose, or help you push on the board a lot, or kind of mess up your whole turn. And if you're a fan of Crip streams on Twitch, you've probably seen a lot of salt and people kind of rioting all the time when he has a god draw, or if he kind of throws the game a bit when he has the worst draw ever, and Crip normally blames it on RNG or something or whatnot. But that's basically it. You kind of draw a random card, and you can't do anything about it. It's the name of the game. Um, and what Blizzard's trying to do this, and what they're trying to do for esports is kind of lower the RNG by bringing in team-based esports matches between teams. And how this helps out esports in Hearthstone, Stephen, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, so I think what Blizzard's trying to do is essentially maximizing the amount of games being played. So each player will play face to face against each other, 5 matches at a time. So that will actually generate a lot more matches, which will slowly minimize the RNG a little bit because by nature, Hearthstone is a card game. It's people do get lucky. People sometimes get very unlucky, like Simon was talking about earlier. So by making this kind of team league thing a standard competition for Hearthstone, I feel like that the RNG is going to be lower. People will recognize Hearthstone more because to be frank, the Hearthstone is a great game. Blizzard has been trying really hard to promote it, but the problem is a lot of people don't take it as a esport. It's not as competitive because of the nature of the RNG. Kind of like you said, right? Because if you let's say I have a full deck of cards, my half of my cards are playable in the very beginning, but in my starter hand, I drew all the cards that I cannot be able to play in the beginning. That's called RNG. That can lose you games. That can be upsetting, especially if there's thousands of dollars on the line. I remember last BlizzCon, there was a two players playing against each other. One of them was up 3-0 or 3-1, 3-1 basically, and then he ended up losing the whole series by a reverse sweep. And you have to think about it let that process for a second. Right? They're probably very similar in skills. He's up by 3 games, and yet he still lost. How did he lose? Because his opponent got a little lucky. He got a little less lucky, and that's a matter of $10,000, $20,000. That's a very big deal. So Blizzard by doing this, I think, and I feel like they will help with the competitive scene. It will make the competitive scene a little less random, a little more fun to watch as well. And I think that's kind of the take that Blizzard wants to take with the global games. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like you said, of course there's luck in Hearthstone. Of course there's also skill in Hearthstone. But the thing about Hearthstone is where it makes it stand out among many card games is Hearthstone. The way you make plays, it's okay, straightforward. It's a decision making game. You make the best of good situations when you draw a good card or you have a good hand, and then you also make the best of bad situations, which also happen as much as the good situations, and that's RNG. And of course, luck comes into the equation, and decision making, good decision making at all stages, the skill part. And other than good decisions and bad decisions, when the situation presents itself, you also have to account for possible future situations and what you do when you have this situation, what you can do to best prepare you for future situations or future card draws, as in Hearthstone. So to counteract this kind of variance, you need to have the best decision making in the long run. And if you're making good decisions in the long run, you're lowering your variance. And the more you play and the more good decisions you make in the long run, the more times you're going to be winning and the better results you have. So in the short run, which what Blizzard is trying to do for Hearthstone tournaments is bring in more games. This in the short run lowers variance because there's more games being played, there's better decisions being made, so there's a lowering of variance and an increase of skill and a decrease of luck, which cannot be absolutely decreased, but there's definitely an increase of skill and a decrease of luck. So that's what Blizzard is trying to do.
Cool. Yeah. So I think we talked a lot about Hearthstone and card games. And Simon went over a very long turn to kind of explain how the game works and the skill cap and things like the skillful part of the game of a sport. So with that said, I think we should give it a verdict. I think Hearthstone is doing fairly well, and Blizzard's doing the right direction. Definitely, there's still a little bit of luck in there. There's still some players that probably get upset over losses. Of course, everybody would. If you're a true competitor, I think you'll be upset if you lose ever. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think definitely the game itself is going the right direction. The league is doing great in multiple dimensions. I'm still I definitely will still want to see the game and how it plays out for the next few months. Maybe there's a prize pool that might be increased that needs an increase. Maybe there's small parts that needs a little bit of tweaking. But the at least this is probably I would say it's probably the most forward step that Blizzard has ever taken for Hearthstone to try to make it into a competitive scene.
Yeah, it's a good direction they're taking.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Hearthstone and how Blizzard is trying to make Hearthstone into an esport. I want to take a step back real quick and talk about esport as a whole, give you some general ideas of what exactly it is. That way it helps you visualize how important this industry is, how lucrative this industry is. So esport is essentially a electronic sport where players plays basically essentially video games behind either a computer or some sort of machine that's runs on games, and these games happens to be very competitive. It's not necessarily just people sitting behind a desk and play games all day. Those guys are practicing 8 to 10 hours every day, honing their skills. You and I as average gamers won't be able to play anywhere close to their level. So it is competitive. It's not for everybody. There is a competitive scene, and it is growing very quickly. I think this year alone, Venture Beats has predicted esport to be a 600 to 700 million dollar industry, and it will be probably growing up very soon to about 1 billion. And Simon, do you have some of the stats you can share with us real quick?
Yeah. Basically, in 2016, roughly there are over 20,000 tournaments worldwide, which is massive. And you have these tournaments all over the world. You have them in China, you have them in America, you have them in Europe. And each of these tournaments, you're having massive amounts of people paying money, but also staying there for hours on end. So they come in on Monday and they leave. They go in and stay in the morning and they leave at night and they come in the next day and they do this day in, day out. And I believe there are 200, 300 million esports fans watching online and also attending live tournaments. And some of these tournaments can get up to, say, tens of thousands of people at the same time. So you have massive NBA uh, venues being filled or other kinds of sports stadiums being filled for esports events, and that is massive. And over the world, there are probably 200, 300 million in prize money, 200, 300 million dollars, and this wasn't around, say, a few years back, and it's really blown up in the recent years. And now $300 million in prize money is huge for the players. And at one of these tournaments, the first place is probably getting 10 million in prize money, which is a life-changing thing for one team, and let alone a player. So that's huge.
Right, yeah. So I think definitely it's very big. Like a few years ago, as players, typically as esport players, you don't really get paid as much. Let's say there's no open drafting, and signing Yao Ming or LeBron James is couple million per year very easily. For these kind of players, they're very young. They're 18, 16, 19. These guys will maybe get a few $100s a month as a professional gamer. And like you said, it's growing very rapidly in the past few years. So now we see people in China uh, signing professional players. Back in the days, they're trading players, and it's couple tens of millions RMB, which is several million USD. So these kind of changes are really revolutionary, and I feel that it is becoming a very mainstream thing. I know Russia recently recognized esport as a sport itself. One of its richest billionaires in the country also invested about $100 million into the esport scene, trying to cultivate it. It is the next growing thing. I feel like a lot of people like Shaq O'Neal especially, these kind of actual professional sport personnel have been invested into esports as well. So I feel like in general, people are starting to recognize it more and more as a sport versus back in the days where it's just a bunch of kids playing games, being rowdy, being annoying. Now it's Lots of it's becoming very, very professionalized.
So that's a lot of money coming into the industry, but also where is it coming from specifically and where it's going to? So, like you said, the Russian investor. I read something on that recently, and a lot of the money is going into the infrastructure, but also the teams itself. And I think he recently bought a massive couple $1 million mansion for the players themselves. So that's infrastructure, that's training facilities, that's places where players can go live and train at the same time. So it's become a house. And also, money's coming in from gaming companies themselves. And I believe they're part of the 600 $700 million that the industry is valued at right now. Around 20 to 30% is coming from the game companies themselves. So that means they actually believe that this is a promising field to invest in, and they believe in the future of it. So they're taking a chance. And also, money is also coming in from sponsors and advertising companies, and also many other actual sports teams are, like you said, basketball professional people, and also teams themselves are starting to invest in the industry. But where's all this money going to? This money going to, like I said before, the teams themselves, the players, the running of the venues, the hosting venues, the infrastructure and everything, advertisements, player prize pool. That's probably quite a big one. Venue hosting, obviously, also a big one. And also, you need to host these tournaments. You also need to bring in a massive team, a production team. You need people to commentate. You need people to camera shoot the things. You need people to actually do all the operational work and administration work at the venue. So that's a big thing. You know how when you go to a massive sports competition and you get food and you get drinks at the venue, esports will soon be having this. There's companies looking into this and they think there's a lot of money to be made. So this will happen soon as well. Um, but not only with a lot of money coming in and going out, there's also a lot of problems and things that need to be tackled surrounding esports. And Stephen, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so there's just to follow up a little bit from your previous comment on where the money's coming in. There's actually also a player crowdfunding kind of way. So for a lot of the major tournaments, like the international, with several tens of millions of dollars of prize pool, a lot of this money is actually crowdfunded. People love to donate to watch good, great games. They love the in-game virtual items that they get. So a lot of the money that's being made are actually also coming from the crowd. The more money they put into the esport, put into the game, the more money the developers will make, the better the production, the better the tournament itself. I also almost feel like the donations, the crowd funds are actually in a way it's in a form of ticketing, kind of similar to NFL. When you go to a game, you had to pay for your ticket, right? So this is kind of the way for online players or viewers to watch games from abroad. So you have millions of players or millions of viewers, yes, watching single events at the same time compared to maybe several tens of thousands in the venue. So it will be it's kind of similar to TV, except you're watching on your computer instead. So going back to talk about some of the problems I feel that is rising in the current industry, especially in esports, is that there's a high level of demand on traveling with players. People love to see players at a local event. These events have tens of, not even tens of thousands, now it's hundreds of thousands to millions of prize pool per tournament. They want to see these players face to face against each other in a local center, just like all other sports. So traveling became started becoming an issue recently, and with the U.S. recent stricter rules on getting visas, traveling, and such, there's definitely a lot of concerns when it comes to players that are coming from, let's say, a country like China that tries to get their visa to the U.S. Well, the Russian Federation, the country, Russia itself, recognize esports as a sport. Most of the countries still doesn't really understand or be
concerned about esport at the moment. So let's say last year alone, there were at least 10 different teams that were denied a visa to come into the US to compete professionally. And this is really devastating for the players. Again, like for them, the prize pool is what matters. The pride is what matters. You can't go to, let's say, this is kind of absurd of an example, but the Super Bowl, one of the teams ended up not making it because of a visa issue. That's very very absurd to for us to hear, but it's a very real issue right now. The players from a lot of countries cannot travel to the U.S., for example, to compete. So what end up happening is they will get replacements or their spots gets forfeited whatsoever. But this is becoming a very very concerning issue. However, I think Riot, which is the game publisher of League of Legends, have been making its ways to pave its ways in the US, especially to get their players the visas, get them sponsored as a athlete instead of just having to come here for traveling or business. So I think in the future, this kind of issue will be lessened, but right now it is a very big concern due to the growth of demands of local lands.
Mm. I think one thing that we also need to take into account is that if these players are denied before they before they go to say a final or a semi-final tournament, which is in the US, they've probably been training for countless months or even up to a year before they go to participate in this event. And also, they were participating in local competitions, not only in their own country, but around other countries around the world before they went to the US. So on top of training, on top of winning many competitions to be able to go to this final in the US, but then being denied, not only this takes up a lot of time, but also it really disheartens a player.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think it's definitely a growing issue. There's a huge demand. I feel for the next few years it'll get better, but right now we definitely. I personally feel like esport is becoming such a mainstream thing that in the next few years this kind of problem won't exist. As a competitor myself, I personally feel that if let's say I won a tournament and all of a sudden I can't go to the final, I'll be very disappointed. I'll probably be very upset. So some closing thoughts about esports. It's definitely a very quickly, rapidly growing scene. It is recognized in certain countries already. It might become a next Olympic sport as well. I think there's some problems that can be worked that needs to be worked out, but right now it's definitely a very lucrative scene. It's growing really quickly. The players love it. People love it. There's probably more people watching esport than American football's final, let's say. Um, so it's definitely a force to be reckoned with. The traveling issues are definitely something that needs to be worked on in the future, and there's probably a little bit more logistics protecting the players and such. But I think right now it's at a pretty good spot. I just want to hopefully see much more maturity and growth in it in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if you look at the young people these days, they grow up playing games. Even at my age, like 20s, 30s, there's still people playing games. And the people, especially young people, they're growing up playing games. They're growing up watching games. So when they get to our age, they're going to be growing watching games as well. So say probably like 5 or 10 years from now, you'll have more people watching esports than actual sports. That is possible. I'm not saying it definitely will happen, but the amount of people watching games is going to explode in the next 5 to 10 years, and with that explosion will come more money, more investment, better venues, better structure, and hopefully countries and also individual gaming organizations will start supporting this whole process and actually making the industry shine as a whole.
Cool. Yeah. So with that said, I think that will end today's broadcast. We hope you enjoyed our kind of discussion and our opinions on certain things here and there. Feel free to send us any feedback. We'd love to hear from you in terms of what we can do better. What else would you want to hear from us to talk about next time? And so with that said, let's close it out, Simon.
See you guys.
All right. Take care.